From my perspective, vulnerability is just part and parcel to who we are. It's who we are as human beings. And every spiritual tradition that I know has some kind of a myth, some kind of a story that tries to get at that, that tries to say, fundamentally as humans, we're exposed. We are vulnerable to one another and to ourselves and to life, and that's okay.
When life throws a challenge at you, one thing is certain: to find a resolution for every issue, every problem, for everybody, there's more than one way. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the More Than One Way podcast. I'm Whitney Ross, and with me, as always, my good friend, Thom Rasnick.
Hey, Whitney.
Hey, Thom, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm good, except for I had this experience on Sunday, and I just can't get it out of my head. It's just sticking with me.
Huh.
So, want to hear?
Yeah, tell me.
Okay. So I'm up in church at St. John's Cathedral and in this area called the Welcome Center, and I'm hanging out, and this guy comes walking out of the sanctuary. You know, the place where the church stuff happens. That's what the sanctuary is. And he comes walking out. And he had that look on his face like, where am I?
Oh, okay.
So, being the kind-hearted Father Rasnick that I am, I said, hey, you need some help? But I think I did it nicer than that. I said, can I help you? And he said, no, I'm good. So he wandered around a little bit, and then he walked past me. And he came back about 2 minutes later, and I go, still good? He said, yeah, I'm good. And he just kept walking, and then he's like, where's the bathroom? So I told him where the bathroom was, and he went. Then he did what he had to do, and he came out of the bathroom, and he says, I said to him, so you good? Can I help you? And he goes, yeah, I'm good. So he walks by me again. And then 30 seconds later, he comes walking back, and he goes, I'm totally lost. I have no idea where I am. And I said, where are you trying to go? And he said, I'm trying to go back into the church. And so I showed him exactly how to go back into the church. And what I keep thinking about is, why is it so hard for people to ask for help? Mm-hmm. Why is it so hard for people to just say, yeah, I do. I need your help?
That's a great question. And, it's May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so in light of that and kind of with your question in mind, we have a special guest with us today.
All right.
That we're excited to have join us. So we have Machaela Rausch with us. She's a clinical counselor focusing on performance and mental health through individual counseling, group counseling, psychoeducation, and crisis management.
Oh, my goodness.
So welcome. We are so glad that you're with us today.
Machaela, I'm so glad you're here. I didn't sleep over this whole weekend because of that question.
So maybe that's where we can start.
Yeah.
I think I was laughing and giggling as I was hearing you tell the story because that's a very common thing and such a small version of when we don't want to ask for help.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And what's that all about? What do you think that's all about? I mean, in your professional life, do you find that it's hard for people to ask? Was
it hard for that guy to ask for help?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
And so it's like, does that play out in your life all the time?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he was just asking for help to go to the bathroom, right, and find his way and then get back somewhere. And that's a small daily task. Imagine going and asking for help in your marriage or a big life decision to make, where I should go, what I should do. Should I get married? Should I not? So, everywhere, all day plays out.
So it plays out in your professional life. How so?
I think getting in the door, starting the journey of asking for help is really hard. Yeah. I think him asking for help, that was a really vulnerable thing to do. So I think people are afraid of that vulnerability or needing others. So it plays out like that. And then throughout the entire journey of therapy, it's a lot of decision making, and you have to open up your heart and tell stuff that you might be judged for or you fear being judged for with a stranger.
Right. Mm-hmm. So in the day-to-day stuff, people have a hard time asking for help when they come in with bigger questions about their life, bigger issues in their life. When they come in to see you, they have a hard time asking for help. All that's reminded me of, for some reason, Simone Biles.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
Well, what about that?
I think most people know her story and that she had to step back from her sport because she was really overwhelmed and there was a lot going on in her personal life. But all people see is someone that they've looked up to, who's worked really hard, who's made a lot of progress and is a great example of success in our world. And then when she stepped back, she got a lot of backlash for it. And she was already struggling. And then you add that backlash to it. That was really brave and vulnerable.
Why do you think that backlash was there?
I think people sometimes make assumptions or they have an opinion, and we aren't in her shoes, right? Like we don't know her walk. And so people were making their assumptions based on all they have seen with her versus being in her shoes.
Sure. Yeah.
So people assume like somebody like a Simone Biles, who's just such a great athlete.
Got it all together.
Right. So that took a lot of not only courage, but just a willingness to be like a vulnerable human being. Because I could see her thinking of herself as like the pinnacle of everything.
I mean,
right?
She's one of the greatest gymnasts of all time.
Yeah. Yeah. So how is it that she was able, in your opinion, how is it that she was able to kind of overcome all that and be willing to step out and say, wait, I can't go on. I need some help?
I think that's a hard thing to say because I wasn't in her shoes, right? And I didn't work with her on it. So I can't say why she made that choice, but I think hopefully she had some guidance and some help and found a way to reach that vulnerability. And it's sometimes, I think the original backlash was that was selfish or that she should be grateful for what she has. She should be willing to go out here and do this thing that she's so lucky to get to do that a lot of other people can't do. But in reality, she's a human too. Right. And in my field, we frequently are preaching like, you are more than your sport. You are more than what people see. Like, you have to take care of you in order to be able to do the things that she does. So there's a level of talent to it, but it's a day in and day out process that they put so much hard work and effort into that a lot of us, we don't see them put that in. So, yeah.
And so we can forget that human side of it and all that.
So that was obviously a really brave thing for her to do. With that in mind, I mean, do you see more people kind of coming forward for help, or?
I think there's definitely been a shift over time and generations. I think the generation we have now are coming up and using their voice as much as possible. And from that, we're learning that it's okay to need help. She was a great example of that. There are others who have been great examples, and I think it comes from the people around you. So I could see other athletes looking up to her and seeing like, oh, one of the greatest gymnasts in the world has come forward and is saying she needs a break, she needs a moment. I think that allows others to have grace and see that they might need a break in a moment. And I think that relates to the rest of the public too, not just athletes.
Yeah, so it's not weakness or something to be ashamed of to ask for help, to say, I'm a human being and I need to take a break, or I'm a human being and I need somebody to help me out. It's so interesting when those things, because in my world, kind of the spiritual world, oftentimes things like vulnerability and asking for help are viewed as weakness. Are viewed somehow or another as like either maybe you don't have enough faith, or maybe you just don't have your stuff together at this point in time, rather than, no, we're human and this is part of the human condition. This is part of what it's like to be human. And do you experience that too, that people seeing that stuff as weakness?
Absolutely. The greatest part of my job is when somebody realizes that it's not weak and they ask for help from somebody, or they share something that they feel is embarrassing or that they should feel ashamed of, and hopefully are met with, this isn't something you should be embarrassed of, or you shouldn't feel ashamed because you've done nothing wrong. And I think when we talk about like our faith, I tell people, whatever you believe in, like that has placed these people in your life to help you. That is a gift in and of itself, not a weakness. So use the gifts that have been placed in your life. I tell that to a lot of athletes when we're talking about like, we're a free service to them. So they get to come in and use this, like, please take advantage of it. It's a great benefit. And if you saw me over the course of your 4 years in college or whatever, it can have a lot of growth in your life, and that's not weak. And most of them come forward later and say that it was one of the better things they did for themselves.
Wow.
That's fantastic.
And I think we all know the value of teammates or coaches and trainers and people that help, especially with the physical aspect, but having someone guide us as well with the mental aspect. I mean, for athletes, I mean, that's definitely two sides. I mean, it's not just the physical aspect. They have to be mentally tough and prepared to be able to perform at the way that they do. So having people that can guide us in that realm makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And speaking of Simone, like, she wasn't ready to perform at that level, right? She knew that her mental health wasn't in a place for that. And so she took a step back, because if you think of the repercussions of that, and maybe not asking for that help, that could result in injuries and maybe end her career, worst case scenario, right? So,
Yeah, because I think for me personally, I think in my experience, it's a human issue. It's not necessarily male or female. You might have more cultural stigma around a male asking for help or a female not asking for help, or however it goes. But in terms of vulnerability, it's a human issue, because from my perspective, vulnerability is just part and parcel to who we are. It's who we are as human beings. And every spiritual tradition that I know has some kind of a myth, some kind of a story that tries to get at that, that tries to say, fundamentally as humans, we're exposed. We are vulnerable to one another and to ourselves and to life, and that's okay. That's an okay thing. You want to ask me about what story I have in mind?
Yeah. Do you have a story in mind?
I do have a story in mind, as a matter of fact. I have a story, and we've talked about the story before, and it's the Adam and Eve story. But like all stories and myths that are part of the spiritual realm, there's always more than one meaning to the story. It depends on where you enter in and how you enter in. And one of the things about that story is after they eat the fruit, okay, so they eat the fruit of the tree. I'm just taking for granted that all of our listeners out there know that story of Adam and Eve, right? For those of you who don't, there was this fruit that they weren't supposed to eat, and they ate it, okay? And after they ate it, the story says their eyes were opened, and they saw that they were naked, and they got afraid. So they hid. Okay? So the myth is symbolically saying they eat this fruit, it opens their eyes, and they have self-consciousness. Right? They experience themselves. They see themselves as alive and experience themselves as alive. And they see that they're naked. And the naked really from the story's perspective doesn't just mean physically. It means they're exposed. They're vulnerable. And something about the exposure and the vulnerability makes them afraid. So then they run off and they hide. And eventually they get fig leaves and they hide behind the fig leaves thinking, this will protect us, right? This will make us. And so from the spiritual perspective, it is, so there's a fundamental part of us that is vulnerable. And for some reason, throughout the centuries, it's made us afraid. So we look for things to hide us, to protect us. Yeah.
I have a question then.
Yeah.
I hear you saying afraid, and I wonder if that could also be like embarrassed or ashamed.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. And shame is a huge part of the whole thing, because it's like there, and shame is in this instance isn't about like something I've done. It's about who I am.
And most of the time in my work, shame is about who I am.
Yeah.
We feel guilt for what we've done, but then we feel shame for who that makes us.
Yeah.
And I was hearing that as you were talking.
Yeah. No, that's lovely. Thank you. Because that's exactly it. So it's I'm ashamed of who I am, and part of the shame is because I'm vulnerable. And so we look at all these different ways, some more large than others, to hide behind, to say, no, that's not me. This is me.
Yeah.
This is me. I am my house. I am my car. I am my bank account. And that doesn't make us horrible in any way, shape, or form. But what it does is hide us from our true self.
I think it's seeking acceptance
Yeah.
and wanting to be seen and accepted by those around us or who we deem valuable in our life.
Yeah.
I like that you said cultural stigma is what leads us to kind of feel ashamed or, not seek out that help that we might need. And cultural stigma impacts males and females versus human nature.
Yeah.
I had a debate earlier today with somebody about nature versus nurture and how that impacts who we are.
There's one that you could go on forever and ever.
Yeah,
about,
you could. Yeah.
Yeah. So in this one, this is kind of the vulnerable part would be more of our nature. It's not. I can't. It's not like I choose to be vulnerable or I don't. No, you just are. What I choose is to hide. And once again, from the spiritual perspective, then you never really get to know that true self that really is the image of God from the story's perspective. It really is this beautiful, beautiful creation that's filled with a lot of messy stuff too. But when we hide, we never get to see that. And then we over-identify with things like our jobs or our athletic performance. Or whatever it is. That's what makes Simone Biles, for me anyway, so amazing. That she was willing to set that stuff aside and say, okay, this might damage my being considered the greatest gymnast ever, but I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Because that's what we are as human beings.
Well, and when we hide, so often we're isolating ourselves from community too, that really is part of our wholeness, where we're protecting ourselves, but we end up kind of removing ourselves from something that could help us.
Yeah, we pull away.
Unintentionally, yeah.
Unintentionally, though, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's a real awareness necessarily. It's just responding to how we feel.
Yeah.
And I think there's a difference between pulling away and needing a moment to step back and breathe.
Yeah.
I think Simone's was very intentional, and, I realized that I'm at my limit. I need a moment. I have to put me first. And putting yourself first can be seen as a really selfish decision. But we put ourselves first by coming to therapy or by, scheduling our time out and being intentional and setting boundaries and all the things we talk about in therapy that people feel guilty for at first because they're like, well, doesn't that make me selfish? Or am I mean for putting me first? To some extent, you have to care for you to be able to give to others. And I think she was a great example of taking a step back, not isolating.
Yeah, it's like a healthy selfish. Because you have to have a self in order to give it away, to help others and do all that kind of stuff. Yeah, no doubt. That's lovely. So once again, let's just circle back around if you don't mind, and I'm just going to keep asking the same annoying question.
No question is an annoying question.
Why is it that we're so afraid of being vulnerable, do you think? Once again, this is just your thoughts.
Am I allowed to ask y'all's thoughts?
Yeah, you can, yeah.
Yeah.
Ask away.
But
after your thoughts.
It's different for everybody.
Yeah.
Again, it goes back to like how we were raised or what we're taught, what we believe, what we're exposed to.
I'll tell you one. So my dad was like this big John Wayne fan. John Wayne was like, I'm still thinking I don't know what I'm thinking. He liked John Wayne. Okay.
You know that much.
He liked John Wayne. He thought John Wayne was like, there's a true man, right there. So, and I watched this clip of a movie once. I can't remember the name of it because I don't watch John Wayne. And in the movie, John Wayne said, he was playing like a boss or a colonel in the army or something like that. And this guy comes up to him and he says, oh, I'm so sorry that I'm late. And John Wayne says to him, never apologize, never say you're sorry. It makes you seem weak. And I thought, well, there you go. All right. So they're encapsulated in that little scene is the way I think my dad was raised as a young boy into a man to some degree. And I think it was the dominant way that men in his generation saw himself. That you don't you don't forgive, you don't say you're sorry, you never admit you made a mistake, because all those things look weak. Right? So I grew up with that kind of in the background. My dad wasn't exactly like that. He didn't really believe that completely. But that was in the background. And then playing sports, not to the level of Simone, although I was pretty good. No. Okay, not so. With playing sports, that was reinforced over and over again. You know, don't cry.
Rub some dirt on it.
Shake it off. Don't let them see you sweat. That whole kind of mentality. And you know, I'm 59 now, and what I see is that's not strong. That's not the kind of man I want to be. And that's not the kind of stuff that, once again, the spiritual stuff that I read reinforces. It says, no, really, it's good to get in touch with all that stuff that makes you want to say, I'm sorry. And that makes you want to cry. And that helps you to be a better human being, not necessarily male or female.
Sure.
Right? So it was initially, and sometimes still is, hard for me to be vulnerable because of that backdrop, that John Wayne backdrop, right? But in time I've seen, no, that's a mistake. It's a mistake for me anyway.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes answering that question so hard. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
I think that's what makes answering that question hard, is because it's different for everybody. What makes it hard for the person to ask you for help on where the restroom is and how to get back to the church, that
Right.
I don't know what his struggle was and what led him to that fear, right? It's different for everyone, but I think overall our culture and our upbringing and how safe and comfortable we feel impacts that. I hope maybe over time you've met more people who were okay with you crying and you were like, oh, this isn't so bad. Or it's a beautiful thing, you know, being authentic.
Well, and you know, totally honest, true confessions here. I found a therapist. You know, I found somebody who helps me with taking a look at myself and accepts me for who I am, and that helps me in my life. So, you.
Yeah, good job. I became a therapist because of a therapist.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I think, you know, you'd shared the story earlier about the gentleman looking and he'd lost his way, you know, and I think that's a great example because it was pretty clear what he needed. He needed direction. But there are definitely times when we don't know what's wrong. Things just feel off. And, you know, it was great because you were there. Clearly, you probably had your collar on. You looked like someone who worked at the church that probably could have easily directed him. But there are times we don't know where to go or who to go to. How do you suggest we kind of find direction in those kind of situations?
Like if you want direction into how to get to therapy?
Yeah, or if you just, you know, something's wrong or feels off, or there's something that you're dealing with, but you don't know, maybe you can't even define it. Yeah. You just know something's not right.
I think the first step is just admitting that. Like you have to be willing to tell yourself that something feels off. A lot of the time I hear of people just pushing it down, not willing to accept something feels off. And once you recognize that, then you go to people that you love and you trust, and you can just say something feels off. I don't really know what it is yet. I just know I feel off, or I don't feel as good as I once did. Yeah. And lean on people that you love or feel safe with, people that feel comfortable to be around. And even just that little sentence of, I feel off. Okay, what do you need? Right? Or maybe they'll meet you with, well, I can help you find this, or where can I go? And sometimes we just need someone to sit with us. We don't always need direction. Just someone being willing to sit there can be enough sometimes. Yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question directly. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah.
So what about people who maybe don't have people around them that they feel like they can trust, or that community that they can lean on?
Yeah, that's tough for one, and can feel really lonely and isolating. And I hear that frequently. I think those people, you know, there are websites you can go on and seek help. And part of my job sometimes with people is, hey, I feel lonely and I don't really have any friends, or maybe I just lost a loved one and I don't really know what to do about it. those people come to us and we help you rebuild that community and find ways to grow your community. So that I always tell people in my office, my goal is that we're going to have a good relationship in here that you can replicate out in the real world and take with you. So building that trust and knowing that you as a person don't have to feel shame or guilt or embarrassment for not having those things. You can come in just as you are, receive that love and support, and go replicate that out with other people who will be with you for the rest of your life, hopefully, because you get to leave me at some point. So, yeah.
That's great.
But that's hard when you feel like you don't have anybody. And sometimes maybe you truly don't. Most of the time, there's somebody who's maybe had like an inkling of a thought about you, or they've prayed for you, or they've wished the best for you, or sometimes I'll hear people tell me they just see someone on the street and they're like, oh, they look like they'd be nice. I'd be their friend. Okay, well, why didn't you go up to them? Like, go make a friend, you know? And I think it's, again, that vulnerability and exposing yourself to building that community is really hard for some people.
And I think sometimes in our kind of independent culture, a lot of times we feel like maybe we're putting people out by asking them for help. When it seems like a lot of people, I know when someone asks me for help, I feel, honored that they asked. I mean, helping other people makes me feel good when I can do something to help,
Oh, yeah. My whole job's helping people. So I love getting to help. But I will be the first to say I'm the last person to ask for help.
Interesting. Okay.
Because I grew up that was a burden, or I was the oldest in my family. So it was very much help out with the family, get things taken care of. My dad was military, so he was deployed a lot. And I always, when I'm getting to know people, I'll tell them that my mom became dad and I became mom. And so it was like stepping up a lot. So then asking for help was a really challenging thing. And as I said earlier, I went and saw a therapist myself, and she helped me without asking for anything in return. And that was one of the greatest gifts I've been given. And so recognizing that you can give that gift to somebody else. When you come to a therapist, you don't owe them anything at the end of the day. I'm not a part of your life. You get to go out and live your world, and I only know what you tell me. So the more honest and open you are about being yourself, the more you're going to get from it. And then you get to go on and continue on. You don't have to see me ever again if you don't want to, And I think that's kind of freeing sometimes.
Yeah.
And, as we're talking about reaching out and seeking help, the big difference with coming to see someone for therapy is that it's completely confidential. There are a couple safeguard reasons we go over with you in the beginning, but overall what you say stays between us. A big misconception I have in athletics sometimes, because it is kind of like this big bubble that we all live in. They think that I can go tell somebody something, and I tell them absolutely not. What you say in here stays in here. I joke sometimes that they might not know I see their best friend at 10 o'clock and I see them at 1 because I'll never know and I'll never tell anybody. And I think that for our society in general, knowing that you have a place where you can go and say whatever you want and it's confidential, and hopefully, if done right, it's non-judgmental. That's a really big gift.
That's huge.
I think that's can be really life-changing if you take advantage of it, and knowing that it really is confidential. And if I see you out in public, I can't acknowledge, I might see one of y'all for therapy. You never know. Nobody would ever know because I can't approach you. You're always welcome to come say something to me, but I can't breach that confidentiality first.
Yeah, those kind of safeguards make it easier to be vulnerable. Not that it's easy, but it invites it a little bit more. And that's definitely a part of my world as well in the spiritual realm.
Sure.
I always tell people, I will not bring this up if you don't bring it up. So if you bring it up, we'll talk about it again. If not, I'm not going to say anything about it. And it is in that spirit, with the hopes that you can come here and tell me anything, and there's really nothing I'm not going to think badly about you.
So the importance of it
and
how life-changing it can be for
huge.
People. And it's not that we changed their life, but that they found that power and ability to be vulnerable and accept themselves.
And then they can accept themselves, right? They see that's the deal. Because once again, in the spiritual realm, it's less about what you do, though obviously that can be important. It's more about who you are. It's about who you are as a human being. And once we can get at that place, then who knows what will happen, right?
A lot of magic can happen.
A lot
there.
of magic can happen.
Mm-hmm. And I think if reaching out is hard, there are also just resources. If you Google feeling sad or struggling with depression or struggles in my marriage, lots of things will come up. There are lots of different books you can read, and sometimes it can feel really overwhelming. Am I getting a good resource, or does this align with my values? Things like that. Doing anything is better than nothing, right? If you just somewhere to start.
Might be a good place to start.
Yeah.
Great.
And looking at who you are.
Well, Machaela, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your expertise and your personal experience as well. It's been a great discussion to talk about how we can learn and begin to feel more confident in reaching out for help, because all of us need it. There's never a time when we can't benefit from the support of someone around us. So thank you so much for being here. And we're glad that you joined us today as well. And we'd love to hear from you. If you have some thoughts, or if you have something you'd like to share with us, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you, and we would love to connect in that way. Thanks so much for joining us, and we hope you'll be with us next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the More Than One Way podcast, brought to you by the Center for Spiritual Practice in Knoxville, Tennessee. We really appreciate your time and would love to hear your feedback. You can reach us by emailing hello@morethanonewaypod.com, or you can connect with us on social media using the handle @morethanonewaypod. If you found this episode helpful, we hope that you'll share it with your friends, with your family, with people you work with all the people who you know. Thank you, and take care.